3 months before our wedding. My fiancé told 50 dinner guests he was taking another woman to Dubai for 8 weeks. She was already at the table 3 seats from mine, watching my face. His mother clapped. First, then told the room that smart women know when to look the other way. I did not cry. I found my grandfather's wood chisel in my purse, and I smiled. 4 weeks later, he would beg for rescue from a foreign jail. But first, you need to know what I gave away. Let me take you back into that room. The Whitfield and Hartford private dining room. October light through tall windows, white tablecloths, champagne already poured. Marcus tapped his glass with a butter knife and stood up with the confidence of a man who has never once been told no by anyone who mattered to him. He smiled, not at me at the room, and delivered his announcement like he was sharing vacation plans at a staff meeting. 8 weeks in Dubai and the Maldives, with his friend Chloe, to enjoy, and I am quoting, my last taste of freedom before the ring goes on. The woman's name was Chloe, and she was sitting close enough that I could smell her perfume, something sharp and floral that did not belong at my engagement dinner. She had her legs crossed and her chin tilted up, watching the room absorb the news with the calm attention of someone who already knew how this scene would play. His mother, Eleanor, was the first to move. One clap, then another. Then her voice pitched to carry, "A man needs to blow off steam, Clara. Smart women know when to look the other way. Money comes and goes, but a good wife stays." She said it like a proverb, like wisdom, like something she had cross-stitched on a pillow. 50 faces turned toward me, some with pity, some with discomfort, a few at the beginning of secondhand humiliation that made them stare at their plates rather than watch what came next. The room waited for me to cry, to shout, to throw my champagne in his face and give Eleanor the proof she wanted that I was emotional, irrational, not good enough. My hand slid into my purse under the table and found the chisel. My grandfather's wood chisel, white oak handle worn smooth on one side, where his thumb had pressed for 40 years, still rough on the other, the steel blade cold against my fingertips. I had brought it to the dinner wrapped in cloth planning to present it to Marcus after dessert as a symbol of building our life together. Instead, I held it in my lap and felt the cold metal bite into my palm, and the pain brought something into focus. Not grief, geometry. The clean lines of a decision already forming. I raised my glass. "Have a wonderful trip," I said. My voice did not shake. Marcus looked confused for half a second. He had expected tears, maybe a scene, maybe exactly the kind of meltdown that would prove to his mother I was the hysterical woman they both needed me to be. What he did not expect was the calm. What he could not have known was that the woman holding that champagne glass had already begun dismantling the architecture of their shared life, one load-bearing wall at a time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what happened that night, and every night after, you need to know who I was before Marcus decided I was disposable. You need to know what I built, what I handed over, and exactly how much of my grandfather's life I let him steal. Before we continue, if you believe a woman's worth is not measured by how much she tolerates, please consider subscribing. It is free, and it helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. The first time I met Marcus, I was 28 and still carrying sawdust in the creases of my palms. Not metaphorically, literally. I had spent that Saturday morning at a community workshop in Bridgeport teaching kids how to build birdhouses the way my grandfather had taught me when I was 7 years old. Grandpa Joe ran a small carpentry shop in Naugatuck for 40 years. Never made much money. Never complained. His hands were wider than dinner plates and gentler than anything you would expect from a man who spent his life operating a table saw. When I was little, he would sit me on an upturned bucket, hand me a scrap of pine, and say, "Feel the grain first, Clarabelle. The wood tells you where it wants to be cut. You just have to listen." He died when I was 26 and left me 2 things: his tool bag and $150,000. Every dollar earned one board at a time over 4 decades of honest work. The lawyer who read the will told me Grandpa Joe had written a note in the margin of the trust document in his own handwriting, "For Clara's house. Build it with someone who deserves you." Marcus showed up at a friend's birthday brunch, 2 hours after that workshop. Charming. Confident. He complimented my hands, the calluses, the short nails. "A woman who builds things," he said. "That is rare." Now I know he was not admiring my hands. He was assessing my usefulness. 3 years we were together. 3 years of building what I thought was a life. I was an architect at a mid-sized firm in Stamford, specializing in residential renovation. Good salary, strong reputation. But when Marcus proposed, I started turning down projects that required travel. Skipped a promotion interview because it fell on the same day we were meeting with the wedding planner. Rearranged my career around his comfort. One small concession at a time, the way you rearrange furniture to accommodate a piece that does not quite fit, but you have already committed to keeping. My boss, Grace, once pulled me aside and said, "Clara, you are the strongest spatial designer I have ever hired. Do not let someone shrink your floor plan." I thanked her and went home to cook the dinner Marcus expected at exactly 6:30. We opened a joint savings account at Chase, an escrow-style fund for our first house. A craftsman cottage somewhere in Fairfield County with a workshop in the back where I could restore furniture on weekends. That was the dream. The one Marcus sold me with floor plans he printed from Zillow and a speech about building something together that sounded sincere enough to bypass every alarm my architect's brain should have triggered. He contributed about $30,000 over 2 years. I contributed my entire inheritance, $150,000. Grandpa Joe's 40 years of sawdust and sweat converted into a wire transfer and deposited into an account with both our names on it. I remember sitting at the Chase branch on Summer Street, signing the transfer authorization, and the banker asking, "Are you sure you want both names on the account?" I was sure. I was sure the way you are sure when you have decided that trusting someone is the same as loving them. The day the transfer cleared my phone, chimed that bright metallic ting of the Chase app confirming the deposit. I can still hear it. It sounded like a church bell. It should have sounded like an alarm. Marcus hugged me in the kitchen and cried. His tears wet my collarbone, and I held him and thought, this is it. We are building something real. Grandpa Joe would have been proud. 4 years later, I would understand those tears. He was not moved by my trust. He was relieved by how easy it had been. There were signs, of course. Small ones, the kind you explain away, because the alternative is too expensive to consider. Marcus would check the bank app every morning and mention my purchases before I had finished my coffee. $6 for a latte. Clara. The machine at home makes perfectly good coffee. He controlled the thermostat, the grocery list, the brand of paper towels. He called it being practical. His mother called it being a good provider. Once early in our relationship, I bought a set of Japanese chisels from a tool catalog, $180, for the set my own money from a freelance project. Marcus held the receipt between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. "For what?" he said. "You have your grandfather's tools." He said it the way you say, "You already ate," to a dog begging at the table. I returned the chisels the next day and told myself it was not worth the argument. Now I know that was not frugality. That was training. Every small surrender taught him the next one would be easier. Looking back now, I can map every red flag on a timeline and connect them with a straight red line that points directly to the night of that engagement dinner. But at the time, each flag looked like a wrinkle in an otherwise smooth fabric. Something you iron out. Something you overlook. Something you tell yourself is normal, because admitting it is not normal means admitting that the house fund, the skipped promotions, the inheritance, all of it was a deposit into a vault that someone else held the only key to. The night after the engagement dinner, I could not sleep. Marcus was in the bedroom, snoring with the particular confidence of a man who believed his fiancé would still be there in the morning, grateful and obedient. I sat in the living room, with every light off, holding the chisel in the dark, running my thumb along the oak handle, the way Grandpa Joe used to. That is when I saw the iPad. Marcus had left it on the kitchen counter screen, still glowing. He had forgotten to disable the iCloud sync. His messages, his emails, his photo stream, everything that lived on his phone also lived on that tablet, unprotected, waiting for someone to look. I had never checked his devices before. Not once in 3 years. That night, I picked up the iPad with the same hand that was still warm from holding my grandfather's chisel, and I looked. The messages between Marcus and Chloe went back 5 months. 5 months of planning, scheming, and laughing at my expense. Chloe had pitched the entire trip as a loyalty test. "You need to see if she will wait for you like a good girl," she wrote. "If she throws a fit, you dump her before the wedding and save yourself the trouble. If she stays quiet, you know she will never leave no matter what you do. Either way, you win." Marcus had replied with a string of laughing emojis and a voice note I could not bring myself to play. Below that, a text, "My mom is right. A wife needs to know her place. 8 weeks, she will not say a word. Watch." And then the one that made my vision blur, "She is too naive to figure it out. Just tell her to go take a cooking class, and she will obey like always." My hands trembled. The screen light cast blue shadows across the kitchen walls and onto my face, blue like a bruised blue, like the light in a hospital room. I wanted to close the app. I wanted to put the iPad down and go back to bed and wake up in the morning and believe that what I had just read was a dream or a joke or someone else's conversation that had nothing to do with me. Instead, I scrolled further, because there is a point where denial stops being a kindness you offer yourself and becomes a prison you build around yourself, and I was standing at the door. I closed the messages and opened his email, telling myself I was looking for proof that this was a joke, a stupid game between two people who talked big but meant nothing. I found an email confirmation from a luxury travel agency. 2 first-class tickets to Dubai. Suite at the Burj Al Arab. Connecting flight to the Maldives. Private villa with an infinity pool. Total cost pending final charges. I scrolled down. The payment method listed was our Chase account, our house fund, Grandpa Joe's money. I set the iPad down. Carefully. The way you set down something explosive. My throat tightened. My eyes burned. But I told myself maybe he used his year-end bonus. Maybe the travel agency put a hold on the wrong account and it would be reversed. Maybe the total cost was not as bad as it looked. I believed that for about 6 hours, because believing it was easier than looking at the bank statement. Because looking at the bank statement meant the cooking class, the 8-week silence, the champagne toast at the Whitfield, all of it stopped being a bad joke and became a blueprint for exactly how little I was worth to the man sleeping in my bed. The next morning, Marcus left for the gym at 7. He kissed my forehead on his way out, the same forehead, the same lips, the same routine. Like nothing had happened. Like he had not stood in front of 50 people and announced he was leaving his fiancé to vacation with another woman. Like his mother had not told me to shut up and smile. I waited until his car pulled out of the driveway. Then I opened the Chase app on my phone. The number hit me like a fist to the sternum. $120,000. Gone. Wire transferred 3 weeks earlier to Wanderlust Elite Travel and a personal account under the name Chloe Brennan. $120,000, nearly every cent of what my grandfather had left me. 40 years of Grandpa Joe, standing in his workshop in Naugatuck, shaping oak and walnut and cherry, coming home with splinters in his palms and sawdust in his hair, eating dinner at the same table he built with his own hands, saving $10 here, $20 there, putting it all into a trust for his granddaughter so she could build a life he never got to see. Marcus had taken that money sweat equity, measured in decades, not dollars, and used it to buy champagne in a country he could not find on a map for a woman whose last name I had just learned from a bank statement. My knees buckled. I sat on the kitchen floor, the same cold porcelain tile I had picked out 6 months ago, because Marcus said it was practical and easy to clean. The tile pressed against my cheek. Cold, hard, indifferent. Through the wall, I could hear the shower running in the bathroom. Marcus was humming something, a pop song, something cheerful, something a man hums when he believes the world is arranged exactly as he wants it. I lay there for what felt like an hour. It was probably 4 minutes, and then something shifted. The tears stopped. Not because the pain stopped. The pain was a physical thing, a pressure behind my ribs, like someone had reached inside and squeezed. The tears stopped because a different part of me woke up. the part that had spent 6 years reading architectural blueprints and structural reports, the part that could look at a load-bearing wall and calculate to the decimal point how much weight it could hold before it cracked. That part looked at the bank statement and did not see heartbreak. It saw evidence, it saw a number, it saw a trail. In the corner of the kitchen, leaning against the wall, where I had left it after the dinner, was Grandpa Joe's tool bag. Brown leather cracked at the seams, smelling of linseed oil and cedar. Inside, it were his hand tools, chisels a block plane, a marking gauge, a dovetail saw, tools that built things, tools that did not lie. I looked at that bag and I heard his voice clear as morning. Feel the grain first, Clarabelle. The wood tells you where it wants to be cut. I got up off the floor. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I opened my laptop. And at 2 a.m, sitting at the kitchen table, 4 feet from where my fiancé was sleeping, I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Okafor, a friend of a friend specializing in family law and financial disputes. She answered on the third ring. She had warned me she was a night owl when we exchanged numbers at a holiday party. I told her everything. The joint account, the wire transfer, the engagement, the trip. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Okay, Clara, here is the situation," Patricia said, and her voice was the steadiest thing I had heard in 48 hours. "The bad news is that when you deposited your inheritance into that joint account, it legally became commingled funds. Under Connecticut law, a joint tenancy account means either party can withdraw the full balance at any time without the other person's consent. That is exactly what he did, and technically, the bank had no obligation to stop him." She let that sink in for a moment. However, there is a principle called unjust enrichment. You contributed the vast majority of those funds, $150,000 of the approximately $180,000 total. There is a clear paper trail showing the inheritance source. If you wanted to pursue a civil claim, you would have standing. But litigation takes time and money, and collecting from someone who may not have assets is another challenge entirely. She paused again. "The good news. You are not married to this man. There is no community property division, no divorce decree, no family court jurisdiction over your finances. You are 2 people who shared a bank account and a lease. Both of those can be untangled this week. My recommendation, secure what is left, sever every legal tie, and walk away clean." I asked about the $30,000 still in the account. Patricia was direct. "Withdraw it. Tomorrow morning. You are a joint account holder. The same law he used to take $120,000 works in your direction too. Take what is yours and close your exposure." I did not sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, taking screenshots of every bank statement, every email confirmation, every text message on the iPad. By dawn, I had a folder on my hard drive labeled with a date and a number, the date Marcus announced his trip, and the number $120,000. Evidence. Not for revenge. For the record. Because Grandpa Joe taught me that you measure twice before you cut, and you never throw away the offcuts. You never know when you will need them. The morning Marcus left for the airport, I stood in the doorway of our apartment and watched him drag 2 oversized Louis Vuitton suitcases to the Uber suitcases I now understood were bought with my inheritance. He was wearing a new linen shirt, tags removed, but still creased from the store. He kissed me on the cheek and said, 8 weeks, babe. Use the time wisely. Maybe look into that cooking class Mom found. It will be fun. Marik, his voice carried the particular condescension of a man who believes his instructions are gifts. I smiled. The same smile from the dinner. The one that confused him. Have a safe flight, Marcus. There was one moment of danger. While I was photographing Marcus's credit card statements on his desktop computer the day before evidence Patricia said I might need, I heard the front door unlock. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Marcus had come back from a coffee run. He had forgotten his passport in the bedroom nightstand. I closed the laptop screen, slid the printed bank statement under a magazine, and met him in the hallway holding the passport and his favorite Ray-Ban aviators. "You almost forgot these?" I said, keeping my voice light, handing him the sunglasses. He grabbed them, grinned the grin of a man who believes he is adored. What would I do without you? He did not want an answer. He wanted confirmation. I gave him neither. Have fun, I said. The Uber honked twice. He left. I stood in the doorway until the car turned the corner. Then I exhaled so hard my vision went white, and I went back to photographing every document I could find. The next morning at 9, I was at the Chase branch on Summer Street in Stamford. I withdrew $30,000 every remaining dollar in the joint account and deposited it into a new personal account at a different bank. The teller processed it without question. Joint account holders can withdraw without the other party's approval. By 11, Patricia and I had filed the paperwork to remove my name from the apartment lease. By 1 in the afternoon, I had canceled the supplementary credit card that Marcus used for daily expenses, the one whose balance I paid every month. By 3, I had submitted a 5-week leave of absence request to my firm. My boss, Grace, looked at me across her desk, studied my face for 3 seconds, and said, "Take whatever time you need. Your desk will be here." She did not ask for details. She saw something in my expression that told her the details were none of her business and exactly the kind of thing she understood without explanation. That evening, I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by Grandpa Joe's tools, every piece laid out on a drop cloth, like a surgeon's instruments. The chisels 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4, and the 1 inch that had been in my purse at the dinner. The block plane with the brass adjusting knob, the marking gauge with the rosewood fence. The dovetail saw its spine still straight after decades of use. I ran my hands over each one and remembered Grandpa Joe at his workbench, sawdust in his eyebrows, explaining that the secret to good joinery was patience. Anybody can smash wood together, Clarabelle. Building something that lasts, that takes time. I packed them into the leather tool bag, zipped it shut, and set it by the front door next to my suitcase. I had found Hands Forward, a nonprofit that built hurricane-resistant housing in rural Costa Rica, at 11 the previous night, applied at midnight, and been accepted by 8 the next morning. They needed volunteers with construction experience. Architecture degree, 6 years of residential renovation, a childhood spent in a Naugatuck woodshop learning load-bearing principles from a man whose hands were wider than dinner plates. I qualified on every count. 3 days later, I landed in San Jose, Costa Rica, with Grandpa Joe's tool bag checked as oversized luggage and exactly 0 plans to contact Marcus. Not out of spite, out of architecture. When you demolish a structure, you do not keep calling the building to check if it misses you. You clear the site. You pour new foundation. A van from Hands Forward drove me 2 hours south to a coastal village called Dominical, where a cluster of concrete foundations sat half-finished on a hillside, cleared by last year's hurricane. The air smelled like rain and wet earth and something green and alive that had no English name. A man was standing by the first foundation holding a clipboard and a tape measure. Tall, sunburned. The kind of quiet that comes from years of listening to oceans and engines instead of people. "Clara," he said. "That is me." "David, former Navy engineer, current project lead. You are the architect?" "I am." He looked at my tool bag, then at my hands. He nodded once. "Good. We need someone who knows load-bearing walls." The last volunteer thought sheetrock was a type of music. He did not smile when he said it. He did not need to, and he did not ask about my personal life, my relationship status, or why a 32-year-old architect from Connecticut had shown up in a Central American jungle with a leather tool bag older than she was. He pointed to a foundation, handed me a set of plans, and said, "What is your read on the grade Wemston?" That was the first time in 3 years someone had asked for my professional opinion without following it with, "But let me check with Marcus first." Meanwhile, 9,000 miles northeast, Marcus was living his best performance on Instagram. I know this because my friend Jenna sent me screenshots, not to hurt me, but because she was tracking the evidence trail at Patricia's request. Marcus posted photos of himself in a white linen shirt on a Dubai rooftop bar, champagne in hand, city lights blazing behind him. Chloe draped across his shoulder in a gold bikini at a beach club. Bottles of Dom Perignon, with the price tag still visible. Hashtag blessed. Hashtag living my best life. Hashtag freedom before the ring. He had set his profile to public because, of course, he had the performance only works if there is an audience. Underneath every photo, his mother Eleanor had left a comment. Heart emoji. My king. Fire emoji. Not a single one of those comments mentioned the woman sitting at home who was supposed to be learning how to cook. Except I was not sitting at home, and I was not learning how to cook. On my side of the world, the first 2 weeks passed in a rhythm of concrete and sweat. I learned to mix mortar to the right consistency, not too wet, not too dry, like oatmeal that holds its shape when you tilt the bucket. I learned to set rebar in a grid pattern for earthquake resistance. I learned that David gave instructions the way my grandfather gave instructions once clearly, with the assumption that you were smart enough to remember. When I made a mistake, cutting a 2x4 1/4 inch too short, he did not sigh or correct me in front of the crew. He handed me another board and said, measure twice. Grandpa Joe's rule. David had never met my grandfather, but they spoke the same language, the language of people who build things that matter and do not waste words on things that do not. Jenna convinced me to let her post one photo from my account. It showed my hands gripping a circular saw safety goggles pushed up on my forehead, concrete dust on my forearms, and behind me, the skeleton of a house rising against a sky so blue it looked painted. No caption, no hashtags. The contrast with Marcus's champagne tower photos did not need explanation. Comments flooded in from people I had not heard from in years. Someone wrote, "This is what strength looks like." Someone else shared it side by side with one of Marcus's Dubai selfies, him in a rented Lamborghini shirt, unbuttoned Chloe in the passenger seat. The internet drew its own conclusions, and for once, they were the right ones. Under Marcus's latest post, a comment appeared that Jenna screenshotted for me is not that the guy whose fiancé is in Costa Rica, building houses for hurricane victims, followed by bro, is spending her grandpa's inheritance on bottle service. Marcus did not delete those comments. He was too busy performing his freedom to notice that freedom was building its own case against him. Week by week, the two feeds became a split-screen sermon on character. Marcus posted a $500 a plate dinner at a Dubai Marina restaurant captioned, "Treating myself right." That same evening, I was on my knees in red clay, leveling a foundation with a laser level. I had calibrated myself a headlamp strapped to my forehead because the sun had already set and the concrete would not wait until morning. Marcus posted a photo of champagne being poured into a crystal flute with the Dubai skyline twinkling behind it. The next day, I helped a 12-year-old girl named Sophia carry roof tiles up a ladder because she wanted to help build her own bedroom. Her hands were smaller than the tiles. She did not drop a single one. Those two images, champagne flute and roof tile, lived in different universes. And the internet knew which universe it respected. Marcus noticed the silence, first 4 weeks of zero contact. No texts, no calls, no voicemails, no begging. Then he noticed the photo. He sent a message. "You have nothing to say to me." I read it, sitting on a freshly poured concrete step, the chisel in my left hand, sweat running down my neck. A drop fell from my chin and landed on the oak handle. I looked at his words on the screen. I pressed delete conversation without typing a single letter. David was 10 feet away, sanding a window frame. He glanced over, saw me pocket the phone, and said nothing. He just held up a cold bottle of water. "The header beam on house 6 needs your eye," he said. "I think the span is off by 2 inches. That was David's language of care, not asking what was wrong, but trusting me to be strong enough to focus on what mattered. What none of us knew yet, not me, not David, not even Marcus, was that Chloe Brennan was not a party girl or a temptress or a homewrecker. She was a professional grifter who had been running variations of the same con for 6 years across 3 continents. The 8-week trip was her workspace. Dubai and the Maldives were her hunting grounds. And Marcus, with his ego the size of a penthouse and his judgment the size of a shot glass, was the easiest mark she had ever found. Chloe spent the first 3 weeks inflating Marcus's ego until it was ready to pop. She told him he was brilliant, powerful, too good for a woman like me. She let him pay for everything because a real man provides. Five-star hotels, chartered yacht, VIP tables, private drivers. Marcus signed every receipt with a grin because spending money in front of a beautiful woman made him feel like the man his mother had always told him he was. What Marcus did not realize was that the joint account was empty. The $120,000 was gone, consumed by travel bookings, advance payments, and a direct transfer to Chloe's personal account disguised as a concierge service fee. The credit cards he was now using were his personal ones, and Chloe was systematically running them to their limits. A Lamborghini Huracan rental, $4,700 per day, signed under Marcus's name. Hotel suite extensions at $3,200 per night. A $12,000 shopping spree at the Dubai Mall, where Chloe selected Hermes bags and Cartier bracelets that she packed into a separate suitcase, her suitcase. By the end of week 3, Marcus had accumulated over $80,000 in personal debt, all documented under his name, his signature, his passport number. In the 4th week, Chloe vanished. She did not leave a note or a goodbye. She left a hotel room stripped of every valuable, a rental car returned to the dealership with Marcus's credit card on file, and his passport locked inside a hotel safe whose combination she had changed. She was on a flight to Prague before Marcus finished his room service breakfast. I was sitting on the roof of the house number 7, eating a mango feet dangling over the edge when my phone rang. International number. Country code I did not recognize. Ms. Whitfield. This is Thomas Keene from the United States Embassy in Abu Dhabi. We have a situation involving a U.S. citizen named Marcus Hale, who lists you as his emergency contact. I set down the mango. Below me, David was measuring window frames with a pencil behind his ear. A howler monkey screamed somewhere in the canopy. The Pacific spread out to the west flat and silver, indifferent to every human disaster happening above its surface. Go ahead, I said. Thomas Keene explained with the measured tone of a man who makes these calls weekly. Marcus had been detained by Dubai police for unpaid debts totaling approximately $80,000. Hotel charges, vehicle rental, dining tabs, shopping receipts, all signed under his name and passport number. His travel companion had disappeared with his cash, his identification, and the contents of the hotel safe. Under UAE law, unpaid debt is a criminal matter, not merely civil. Without settlement, Marcus faced prosecution and potential imprisonment. He was requesting emergency financial assistance from his emergency contact. He is asking to speak with you, Thomas Keene said. There was a click. Then Marcus's voice came through, and I put the phone on speaker. Not for the embassy, for the open air, for the trees, for the half-built house beneath me, for David, who had stopped sanding and was standing at the base of the ladder, not eavesdropping, but present. I wanted every word Marcus said to dissolve into the humid Costa Rican atmosphere and become nothing. Clara. Clara, please listen to me. His voice was unrecognizable, not the champagne-tapping baritone from the Whitfield. A thin voice, a wet voice, a voice that had been crying for hours and had worn itself down to a whisper. Chloe. She robbed me. She took everything. My passport, my wallet, my cards. She was a con artist, Clara. The whole trip was a scam. I did not know. I swear on my life, I did not know. I said nothing. Below, a woodpecker knocked against a ceiba tree. Tap, tap, tap. Patient, rhythmic. Like a metronome counting down to something Marcus could not see. Clara. I need money. $80,000. They are going to put me in prison. This is not America. The law's here. That you cannot just owe money and walk away. They already took my belt and my shoelaces. Please, use the house fund. There is still money in the house fund, right? Just wire it to the embassy, and I will pay it all back, every cent, I swear. Please. 3 seconds of silence. I counted them by the woodpecker's taps. The house fund, I said. My voice was the voice that reads a structural damage report. Flat. Precise. Without decoration. That account had approximately $180,000 in it before you wire transferred $120,000 to a luxury travel agency and to Chloe Brennan's personal bank account. $120,000 of those dollars were my grandfather's inheritance money he earned building furniture with his hands in Naugatuck, Connecticut for 40 years. You took his life's work and used it to buy first-class tickets and a villa with an infinity pool for a woman you met at a bar. There is nothing left in that account, Marcus. I withdrew the remaining $30,000 the morning after you left. The silence on his end was a living thing. I could hear him breathing. Short. Shallow. The breathing of a man whose floor has just disappeared. You what? You took Clara. You had no right to. I had every right. Joint tenancy. Either party can withdraw the full balance at any time. That is the same legal provision you used to take my inheritance without my knowledge. I simply applied the same law in reverse. That money was for our house. There is no our house. There is no our anything. My lawyer, Patricia Okafor, removed my name from the apartment lease 3 weeks ago. I canceled your supplementary credit card. I closed every joint financial instrument that connected my name to yours. Between us, Marcus, there is no legal relationship. We are not married, we were never married, and we will never be married. He was crying now, not the careful tears he had produced the day I deposited $150,000 into the Chase account. Ugly tears. The kind that come with snot and broken sentences and the total collapse of a story someone has been telling themselves. Clara, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Chloe manipulated me. She told me what I wanted to hear, and my mom said she said you would understand. Your mother. The words came out steady and unhurried. I was not angry. Anger had burned through me weeks ago and left behind something cleaner, something load-bearing. Your mother stood up at our engagement dinner and told me that smart women know when to look the other way. She said money comes and goes. She clapped Marcus. She was the first person to clap when you announced you were leaving your fiancé for 8 weeks with another woman. She told me to stop being jealous. She told me to learn my place. I paused. Let the silence carry its weight across 9,000 miles of ocean. So here is my suggestion. Call your mother. Tell her the money went. Tell her her son needs $80,000 to avoid a foreign prison because the woman he chose over his fiancée turned out to be a better con artist than either of you. And then ask her to clap. Clara, you were not scammed, Marcus. You chose this. You chose Chloe. You chose 8 weeks of freedom. You chose to stand up in front of 50 people and tell them your fiancé should go learn to cook while you flew business class to Dubai. The test you wanted to run on me, whether I would be obedient, whether I would wait, whether I would beg that test is over. And you failed it, not me. Please, I am begging you, Mr. Keene. I said, addressing the embassy official, who I knew was still on the line, please update Mr. Hale's emergency contact information. His mother's name is Eleanor Hale. She lives in Glastonbury, Connecticut. She will know what to do. I paused one last time. Let him hear the wind through the trees and the distant sound of David's saw resuming work, the sound of someone building something that would stand. Marcus, I hope you find your way home, but you will not find it through me. I ended the call. The screen went dark. Below me, the Pacific Ocean shimmered like hammered silver, vast and blank and indifferent to every promise ever broken above its surface. David was standing at the base of the ladder. He did not look up with concern or pity or curiosity. He held up 2 bottles of water. I climbed down and took one. We sat on stacked lumber and drank without speaking, watching the sun descend behind the tree line, and the silence between us was the most honest sound I had heard in months. The aftermath came slowly, the way water finds cracks in concrete, not all at once, but with an inevitability that nothing could stop. To extract Marcus from a Dubai police station, Eleanor and her husband Harold had to liquidate half of their 401k retirement fund, the account they had spent 30 years building. I learned this from Jenna, who heard it through a mutual friend because I had blocked every number connected to the Hale family. The early withdrawal penalty was 10%. Federal income tax on the distribution was another 22%. On top of that, $80,000 wired to the Dubai authorities to settle Marcus's debts, plus a last-minute economy ticket home. Eleanor stood at a Bank of America branch in Glastonbury and signed the withdrawal papers. Her hand paused twice. The teller waited. Harold stood behind her with his arms crossed and his jaw set, looking at the floor, the way men look at floors when they have lost an argument they did not know they were having. The teller stamped the form a bright red, early distribution, penalty applies. And the sound of that stamp hitting paper echoed through the marble lobby like a gavel. Like the clap Eleanor had given at the Whitfield 9 months earlier, only this time the sound meant something different. This time the sound meant consequence. The woman who had told me money comes and goes was now watching it go. For good. With a 10% penalty and a 22% tax bite. And the particular humiliation of knowing that every dollar leaving her retirement account was a direct consequence of telling her son that real men deserve to blow off steam and real women deserve to shut up about it. Marcus flew home in a middle seat on a 14-hour economy flight wearing clothes he had borrowed from the embassy's lost and found bin. No luggage. Chloe had taken the suitcases. He landed at JFK with a credit score that would make a mortgage broker flinch, a social media history that now functioned as a public museum of his humiliation, and the knowledge that his fiancé was 9,000 miles away, building houses for strangers, and did not care enough to answer his calls. Someone online had placed his champagne tower selfie next to my circular saw photo with the caption, "Choose your fighter." It was shared 11,000 times. Marcus deleted his Instagram, but the internet does not forget. The internet does not care that you are embarrassed. The internet has screenshots. He moved into his parents' basement in Glastonbury. The golden son. The man who needed freedom. He was free now, free of savings, free of credit, free of a fiancé, free of dignity. His commercial real estate career, which depended entirely on image and client trust, was functionally over. No one hires a broker whose name autocompletes on Google with Dubai scam and fiancé builds houses. Eleanor, according to Jenna's source, alternated between furious silence and tearful lectures that went nowhere because Marcus had no defense left and no money to rebuild one. Harold slept in the guest bedroom. The family dinners stopped. The house that had once been loud with Eleanor's opinions was now quiet in a way that nobody wanted the quiet of people who had spent everything they had financially and emotionally on a lie they had all agreed to believe. I received a long text from Eleanor forwarded by Jenna since I had blocked the number. It swung between accusation and apology like a wrecking ball looking for a wall to hit. You could have sent the money. You could have prevented this. Instead, you let my boy suffer in a foreign country. 2 sentences later. I should not have said what I said at the dinner. I did not mean it the way it sounded. She meant it exactly the way it sounded. She just did not expect it to cost her retirement. I read the message once. I did not reply. There was nothing to say to a woman who had spent 30 years building a son who believed the world owed him everything and a daughter-in-law owed him more. 2 weeks later, something happened that I did not expect. A handwritten letter arrived at the Hands Forward camp, forwarded from my P.O. box in Stamford. It was from Maria Elena Castillo, the mother of the family who had moved into house number 4, the third house I had worked on. She wrote in Spanish, and David translated it for me over morning coffee reading. Slowly his voice, careful with the words, "My daughter used to wake up screaming every time it rained, because the last storm took our roof, and she thought every rain would take us too. Last night it poured for 3 hours. She slept through all of it. Her bed was dry, her walls were dry. She slept with her mouth open and her arms spread out like a starfish. Thank you for building us a home that does not break." David stopped reading. He looked at me. I looked at the letter. My hands callous, sunburned, nicked in 11 places, from saw blades and concrete edges, held a piece of paper worth more than $120,000. More than a house fund. More than a champagne toast at the Whitfield. That letter was the first thing anyone had given me in years that I did not have to earn by shrinking myself. I carried it in my back pocket for weeks until the paper went soft from sweat and the ink started to blur. I did not care. I could recite it from memory. 7 months after I landed in Costa Rica, I was still there. Not visiting, not hiding, living. I had negotiated a remote consulting arrangement with my firm 3 days a week, reviewing residential plans on my laptop, from a folding table under a corrugated tin roof 4 days a week, building houses with my hands. Grace. My boss called it the best arrangement the firm had ever made. Your designs have gotten better since you started getting dirt under your nails again, she said. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. My morning started at 5. Coffee black, no sugar, no cream, brewed in a French press I bought at a village market for $8. Marcus used to insist I drink coffee with vanilla syrup and oat milk because that was how his mother made it, and he said black coffee was too aggressive for a woman. 7 months of drinking it my way, and I realized I had never actually tasted coffee before. I liked the bitterness. I liked how it woke up my mouth before it woke up my brain. There were other discoveries, small ones scattered through the weeks like coins in couch cushions. I liked sleeping with the windows open, the sound of tree frogs, better than any white noise machine Marcus had programmed for our bedroom. I liked eating dinner at 9 instead of 6, sitting on the cabin porch with a plate of Gallo Pinto and a cold imperial beer, watching the stars appear one by one like someone was slowly turning on lights in an enormous house. I liked singing in the shower without anyone banging on the wall to say I was off key. For 32 years, half of them spent adjusting my volume and my opinions and my coffee and my schedule to fit someone else's preferences. I had never once asked myself the simplest question, what do I actually like? Costa Rica was answering it for me, one morning at a time. I liked the way my body looked after months of physical labor, tan defined, marked with small scars that each told a story. The crescent on my left thumb from a slipped chisel on house 3. The pink line along my forearm from a sheet metal edge on house 7. The perpetual bruise on my right knee from kneeling on concrete. My arms could carry an 80-pound bag of concrete mix from the truck to the site without stopping. My hands could hold a 2x6 steady while a saw screamed through it. These were not the hands of a woman who had been robbed. These were the hands of a woman who had rebuilt. One evening, the whole crew gathered for a barbecue on the beach. Volunteers, local workers, a few families from the completed houses. Sophia, the 12-year-old who had carried roof tiles with me, ran up and grabbed my hand. She had drawn a picture of a house, blocky, lopsided, the kind of house a child draws, and written underneath it, in careful English, Clara's house. Not the house I lived in. The house I helped build. Her house. She had named it after me. I held that piece of paper and felt something shift in my chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the equatorial sun and everything to do with being seen not as Marcus's fiancé, not as Eleanor's punching bag, not as a woman who got scammed out of her inheritance, but as someone who showed up with a tool bag and built something that mattered. But not every night was easy. Some nights I woke at 3 a.m, reaching for a body that was not there. Not because I missed Marcus, but because the muscle memory of 3 years does not delete itself on command. The empty side of the bed was cooler than my side, wider. I would lie there listening to the tree frogs and the distant crash of the Pacific, and remember Grandpa Joe saying that even the best wood cracks sometimes. That is just what happens when something dries out or bears too much weight. You do not throw it away, he said. You fill the crack with glue and clamp it tight and let it heal. Sometimes the repair is stronger than the original. Some nights the emptiness felt like freedom. Some nights it felt like an open wound. Both things were true at the same time, and I learned to hold them together the way you learn to hold a chisel and a mallet, one hand for the direction, one hand for the force. The cracks were healing. Not perfectly, not invisibly, but strongly. David and I built house number 10 together. He framed the walls. I designed the layout and supervised the roof pitch. He never told me what to do. He asked, "What do you think about the overhang on the south side, architect?" He called me architect, the way some people call a doctor doc, with respect baked so deep into the word that it stops being a title and becomes an identity. There was something between us. Warmth, gravity, the kind of thing that lives in the space between words, in the way he handed me tools, handle first, in the way he stood a little closer than necessary, when we reviewed blueprints, in the way he laughed at my terrible Spanish and taught me the right words with the patience of a man who believed correction was a form of kindness. It was not a rescue, it was not a replacement, it was two people standing on solid ground, recognizing that the ground was shared. The day I mounted the brass number plaque on House 10, I pressed my palm flat against the concrete wall, warm from the sun, rough under my fingers, solid in a way that no bank transfer could replicate and no con artist could steal. This wall would hold a roof over a family. This wall would not lie. This wall would not clap when someone humiliated me at a dinner party. I stood there with my hand on the wall and felt something I had not felt since Grandpa Joe's workshop, the specific pride of having made something real with my own body. That evening, the air smelled like wet earth after a tropical rain mixed with fresh sawdust, a smell so close to Grandpa Joe's shop that I closed my eyes and was 7 years old again, sitting on a bucket, listening to a man who believed that building things with your hands was the most honest work in the world. October 14th. I woke at 5, brewed coffee, and did not remember the date until I saw the notification on my phone. An email from Marcus. Subject line: Today was supposed to be our day. I was wrong about everything. Please give me one chance to explain. 3 paragraphs. I could see the scroll bar. I read the first sentence. My pulse stayed flat. My chest stayed open. I felt the particular nothing that comes when a storm has passed so completely that you forget it was ever a storm at all. It is just weather now, and weather does not require a response. I pressed delete and put the phone in my pocket. The chisel was on the workbench, where I had left it the night before. Grandpa Joe's chisel. The one I had gripped in my purse at the Whitfield 9 months ago, the cold steel and rough oak handle pressing into my palm, while Marcus told 50 guests I was worth less than 8 weeks. The handle was different now. Months of use, real use, not symbolic clutching, had polished the rough sides smooth. My sweat, my grip, my hours of carving window frames and door lintels had transformed the oak until both sides shone the same warm brown. The blade was nicked in 2 places from striking a stubborn knot in a ceiling beam, but it held its edge. I had sharpened it myself on a whetstone slow strokes, the way Grandpa Joe taught me, letting the steel tell me when it was ready. I carried the chisel to house number 10. A window frame waited for its final touch, a decorative border of interlocking leaves that I had designed inspired by the ceiba trees along the ridge. David was already there holding 2 cups of tea. He smiled, not a big smile, the quiet kind that says, "I see you, and I am glad you are here," and handed me one without a word. The ceramic was warm. The same hand that had once held a champagne glass at a dinner where I was told to shrink now held a cup of tea, offered freely by a man who had never asked me to be anything other than what I was. I set down the tea, picked up the chisel, and pressed the blade into fresh wood. The first cut was clean. The grain opened exactly where I asked it to. Outside, the morning sun climbed over the mountains and poured through the unfinished window frame, filling the room with light, a room that would belong to a family I had never met in a country I had never planned to live in, built by hands that a man once said were only useful for holding his coffee. David watched me work. The wood curled away from the blade in a long, thin ribbon. The air smelled like sawdust and morning rain and the first hours of a day that belonged entirely to me. Somewhere very far away, in a basement in Connecticut, a man was staring at an unanswered email. And here, in a room made of concrete and light and 10,000 hours of honest labor, I was building something that would last. If this story stayed with you, I hope it leaves a mark the kind a chisel leaves in wood, not to damage it, but to shape it into something more beautiful than it was before. If you have ever been told you are too much or not enough, if someone has taken what you built and called it theirs, if you have ever held a tool or a dream or a memory from someone who believed in you, know this: your hands remember what your heart sometimes forgets. It is never too late to build again. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about your own moment of rebuilding and subscribe to this channel. Every story here is for women who refuse to let someone else hold the only key to their life.